Okay, this is Coronavirus Diary Jerusalem. And this week in synagogue, actually we're not going to synagogue, this week at home, we will be reading the Song of Songs, which is recited, usually in the synagogue, maybe somebody will scream it on some porch someplace, is recited in the morning of the Shabbat of Pesach. Now, the Song of Songs has an interesting provenance. That is, it was not included in the canon of the Jewish Bible without controversy. Because of the sensual nature of the Song of Songs, and it is sensual in very graphic ways, because of the sensual nature of the Song of Songs, there was a controversy among the Talmudic sages about whether or not it should be canonized with the rest of the Bible. Rabbi Akiva, and he wins the day, Rabbi Akiva says all the songs of the Hebrew Bible, says Rabbi Akiva, are holy. All poetry is holy. Right? The Bible is poetry. Everybody forgets that these days because Judaism, especially certain versions of Orthodox Judaism, have so abstracted and rendered mathematical the Jewish law and the Jewish Bible that we forget that the origin, the sacred texts that we read in the Talmud as well, is a form of poetry. All of the songs of the Hebrew Bible, says Rabbi Akiva, are holy, but the Song of Songs is the Holy of Holies. The song, as I said, records the passion of two lovers, which the sages of the Talmud read as the relationship not between flesh and blood lovers, but between God and his people. The Holy of Holies is the innermost sanctum of the temple. God's love for his chosen nation is the secret that lies behind the love poetry of the song. So Rabbi Akiva says that all poetry is holy, but the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, is this relationship which we reach to, which we understand when reading Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, God's love for his chosen nation. I remember the first time that I went to synagogue on a Pesach where this song was being read. I brought my Art Scroll translation, and that translation provided in English, instead of the text as it's written, it provided that allegorical translation. It skipped from the holy to the Holy of Holies. So, for example, when the beginning, the King James renders a verse from Song of Songs, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine." And I think Rashi, the medieval commentator, there's a drone out there, I guess, but Rashi, the medieval commentator, says that these were not just social or casual kisses. These were kisses mouth to mouth. How does Art Scroll translate it? Communicate your innermost wisdom to me again in loving closeness. They actually include the loving there, which even that you see is a little bit risque for them. That is, they abstract completely out of the language of poetry to this, to the allegorical meaning. Now, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that King Solomon, when he writes the Song of Songs, has many metaphors to choose from in order to talk about the relationship between God and his people. And the one that he chooses is love poetry. Poets are able to access truths that other disciplines are not able to, big claim. And the fact that people can't read poetry has flattened our experience and flattened our understanding of the world. Rabbi Akiva says, first, pay attention to the poetic representation. In order to get to the Holy of Holies, that vision of the divine and the people of Israel, you have to go through the holy. The holy, that's part of the understanding of the Holy of Holies. The two things go together. The metaphor does not erase itself. It is the pathway through which we get to the truth. This insight has been lost completely in our world. In the Jewish world, midrashim, which are interpretive stories, are now interpreted almost always literally or ignored altogether. Why literally? because going along with 19th century assumptions about science and truth, and the Orthodox world has influenced this by as much as anybody, going along with those ideas, there is an idea that somehow interpretation or poetry is bad. And if the Midrash is saying that something is describing something, the first man, Adam, was a giant man, you have to imagine it literally, instead of maybe thinking, well, what are the poets, the sages, the authors of the poetry, what do they want to convey with that image? What do they want to convey about Adam, the first man, with that image of him as a giant? The poetry in our world completely erases itself. Interpretation erases itself. So also in the world dominated by science and objectivity, I feel like I'm going to be maybe abducted now. The notion of scientific objectivity is that the world is given to us and does not need to be interpreted. And the sages understood, and this is the nature of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, that nothing can be interpreted without interpretation. And in a way, poetry is the privileged way, the special way through which we can have that understanding. Coronavirus brings back to us the importance of the humanities. It brings back to us the importance of poetry. It brings back to us the importance of reading. And poetry acknowledges what other disciplines don't. Great poets acknowledge that they can't tell you everything, but they can tell you something. Other disciplines will say in telling you everything, that they leave out almost everything. There is more to heaven and earth, Horatio says to Hamlet, or Hamlet says to Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy. During this time, we get back to reading, we get back to interpreting, we get back to poetry. Have a great Shabbos.